She entered without asking, undressed in silence, and smiled. Until I couldn't breathe. The observation deck was empty when Kyle Martinez arrived for his midnight shift aboard the research station, orbiting Neptune. The silence was almost complete, except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant whisper of stellar winds against the shields. He had been working on the station for 6 months, now cataloging deep space anomalies, and he had grown accustomed to the isolation, but tonight, something felt different. The air seemed charged with an energy he couldn't quite identify. Settled into his station chair, checking the monitoring equipment, when he heard a sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum-controlled environment of the station. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, approaching from the corridor that led to the sealed research wing. His heart rate picked up as he turned toward the entrance. No one else was scheduled for this shift. The rest of the crew was either sleeping or working in completely different sections of the massive facility. The door opened without the usual security chime, without any warning at all, and she walked in. Kyle froze his breath, catching in his throat as he stared at the figure in the doorway. She was humanoid, impossibly so, but there was something unmistakably alien about her proportions. Her skin held a faint luminescence like moonlight on water, shifting between pale silver and soft blue. With each movement, her eyes were larger than human eyes, deep violet, with no visible pupil, just swirling galaxies of color that seemed to see through him completely. Her hair, if it could be called that, flowed down her back in waves of what looked like liquid starlight, constantly moving in. An invisible current sheet stood there studying him with an expression he couldn't read, and then without hesitation, without asking permission, she began to remove her garments. The clothing wasn't like anything Kyle had seen before. It seemed to be made of the same luminescent material as her skin, responsive and alive. The pieces fell away in silence, drifting to the floor like leaves on still water, revealing more of that strange, beautiful skin that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. She never broke eye contact with him, her gaze holding him in place more effectively than any physical restraint. He should have reached for the emergency come, he should have called security, should have done something. Anything, but he sat there, transfixed. As she moved closer to him with movements that were too fluid, too graceful to be entirely human, her feet barely seemed to touch the floor, and she left no sound in her wake. Just that presence that filled the entire observation deck with something ancient and unknowable. When she was close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, she smiled. That smile broke something inside him. It wasn't threatening or sinister. It was knowing, understanding, in a way that made him feel completely exposed, as if she could see every thought, every fear, every secret desire he had ever harbored. The smile said she knew him better than he knew himself, and she was not afraid of what she found there. The expression held patience and curiosity, and something else, something that made his chest tighten until he genuinely struggled to draw a breath. Kyle tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't cooperate. His training, his years of education, his carefully cultivated scientific objectivity, all of it crumbled in the face of this impossible encounter. She reached out with one hand, her fingers longer and more delicate than human fingers, the tips glowing faintly as they approached his face. When she touched him, everything changed. His mind exploded. With images, sensations, emotions that weren't his own, he saw worlds beyond counting, civilizations that rose and fell like waves on cosmic shores. He felt the weight of thousands of years of observation, the patient watching of a species that had been traveling the stars since before humanity discovered fire. He understood in that instant that she was a scout and observer from a race that had been monitoring Earth for longer than recorded history, waiting to see if humans would destroy themselves or reach for something greater. The touch lasted only a moment, but when she withdrew her hand, Kyle felt fundamentally altered, as if his very atoms had been rearranged on some quantum level. She stepped back, her smile deepening as she watched the confusion and wonder play across his face. Finally found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. "Why are you here?" She tilted her head in a gesture that was almost human. Almost, and then she spoke. Her voice was like music heard from far away, clear but somehow distant. resonating in frequencies that normal human speech shouldn't reach. Your kind stands at a threshold. Kyle Martinez, you have reached the point where you must choose to grow beyond your cradle world or to remain children. Playing with forces you do not understand. How do you know my name? How do you know any of this? We have been watching, always watching. Your species shows such potential, such capacity for both creation and destruction. It fascinates us, terrifies us, gives us hope where we had lost it long ago. Kyle tried to process this, tried to fit it into any framework that made sense. Are you here to help us, to warn us? She moved to the observation window, her luminescent form creating strange reflections in the reinforced glass beyond the window. Neptune hung in space, a blue jewel in the darkness, and beyond that the infinite expanse of stars. We do not interfere, we observe, but sometimes observation changes what is observed. You are the first human to truly see one of us as we are, to understand what we represent, and that changes everything. What does that mean? What happens now? She turned back to him, and her expression held something that might have been sadness, might have been compassionate. It was difficult to read alien features, even ones so similar to human. Now, you must decide what to do with this knowledge. You can report this encounter, let your superiors know that you are not alone, that you are being watched and judged, or you can keep this meeting between us and continue your work knowing that everything you do, every choice humanity makes, is seen and recorded by those who came before. That's not fair. That's an impossible choice. She moved closer again, and this time when she smiled, it held genuine warmth. Fair is a human concept, Kyle Martinez. The universe is not fair, it simply is. We exist because we adapted, because we made the choices necessary to survive. Your species now faces similar choices, and we watch to see what you will become. Why me? Why reveal yourself to me? Because you are ready, because in our analysis of human psychological profiles, we determined that you would neither break under the weight of this knowledge nor rush to exploit it. You are curious enough to understand, cautious enough to think. Before acting, you represent the best of what your species could be. Kyle felt tears threatening, though he couldn't explain why. The enormity of it all pressed down on him, the realization that humanity was being tested, judged by beings so far beyond human understanding that their motives might as well be incomprehensible. What do you want from me? What am I supposed to do? Live, she said. Simply continue your work, explore, question, seek understanding. Do what humans do best. Reach beyond your grasp and see what you can achieve. We will be watching, as we always have. But now you know you are not alone in the darkness. She began to move toward the door, her form already seeming less solid, less present in the physical space, and Kyle realized she was leaving. Panic seized him. Wait, I have so many questions, so much I need to know. She paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. You have your entire life to seek those answers, Kyle Martinez. And if your species chooses wisely, you may one day walk among the stars as we do. You may one day join the chorus of civilizations that have transcended their origins. Until then, know that you are seen. You are valued, and your choices matter more than you can imagine. What are you called? What should I call your people? We have no name that your language can properly convey, but in the closest approximation, we are the Watchers, and we have been here since the beginning. With that, she was gone, fading from sight like morning mist in sunlight, leaving Kyle alone in the observation deck with only the evidence of his racing heart and shaking hands to prove the encounter had been real. The garments she had removed were gone. No trace remained of her presence except the lingering warmth in the air and the fundamental shift in his understanding of reality. Kyle sat in silence for a long time, staring at the spot where she had stood. His mind churned through everything that had happened, trying to categorize it, analyze it, make it fit into some rational framework, but it resisted easy explanation. This wasn't first contact as humanity had imagined it. No government negotiations, no formal diplomatic protocols, just one person and one alien sharing a moment of perfect understanding. Eventually, he turned back to his monitoring equipment, his hands moving automatically through familiar routines, even as his thoughts spiraled outward to implications he could barely grasp. Humanity was being tested, observed by beings who had mastered interstellar travel while humans were still struggling to establish permanent colonies in their own solar system. The responsibility of that knowledge felt crushing, but as the hours passed and his shift drew to a close, Kyle realized something else. The Watcher had been right. He wasn't going to report this. He wasn't going to tell his superiors or file an official first contact report, partly because he knew how insane it would sound, partly because he understood instinctively that this was meant to be a private revelation, but mostly because she had trusted him with this knowledge, and he felt compelled to honor that trust when his replacement, a